Hello and welcome to A Shot in the Arm podcast. I'm your host, Ben Plumley, and this is a podcast about global health and human rights. And in this episode, we are focusing on human rights because without them, there's no way in delivering global health programming. Well, our guest today is an example of how to push human rights to the very extreme and achieve amazing results. He is the co-chair of Outright International. He is a program manager at AVAC, a New York-based international organization that balances support for community organizations with the implementation of new HIV prevention and treatment technologies. He was the Champion of Change awardee by President Barack Obama in 2015. He's the co-founder of Global Black Pride. And for me, most of all, he's a board member of an organization very close to my heart, along with fellow Shot in the Arm podster Ponime Mane, Frontline AIDS. Please join me in welcoming Micheal Ighodaro.
Thank you so very much, Ben, for having me. I'm really glad to be here. It's like an honor, and also I feel a little bit starstruck to be here with you because I've known you for a long time, and I'm so very, very proud and pleasure to be here.
Well, it's been a really incredible time for you these last few weeks, and we'll come on to the extraordinary things you've been doing in just a second. But to kick off, could I ask you a bit about your upbringing and your education?
Yeah, I grew up in a little city called Benin City in Nigeria. It's one of the the royal families and the royal states or cities in Nigeria. And before the colonial British people came and almost destroyed it, but we're still one of the only city in Nigeria that has city behind its name. So a lot of states has just states, but Benin City, it's Benin City. So it's one of the only city that has Benin City, city behind its name. So I grew up in Benin City. I went to kindergarten in Benin City and went to primary school, which is after kindergarten in Nigeria. And I was in college, my first year of college, primary school actually, when I left my parents' home at the age of 14. And I dropped out of school after that. So I think my education was somewhat, cut short as a teenager back in Benin City. And I learned a lot from my friends and from queer people, I would say, who taught me all of the things I know today.
When did you discover the fire inside you that surviving wasn't enough, that you wanted to change the world? When did that hit you?
I think, I wouldn't say fire inside of me. I would say, like you said, we were trying to survive. And just like myself and my friends, living in the streets of Benin City as queer teens, all we wanted to do was live till the next day. So we're trying to survive. And during that time, we thought, well, we don't want people, our friends and people to go through what we went through and what we're going through. So we said do more than just surviving and to see how we can stop, young teens and young gay teens from living through the same thing that we went through. So, we created little organizations, on the streets and, we started to fight back, against the oppressors that stood in our way.
And tell me to back off if I'm being too personal about this. But as a young teenager, you were living on the streets. You didn't have a home.
No. So I left my parents' home and I lived on the streets, lived under the bridge. I lived at friends' houses. I lived in the car. So I traveled across Nigeria, trying to meet gay people, queer people, who were welcoming. And I found that it wasn't just me. There were a lot of gay teens at my age, age mates, who were also out of their parents' home and going through the same thing. So we created a bond. I became really close friends, and some of us that are still alive are still very close friends till today.
And I suppose this begs another question: that if you were homeless, and again, please stop me if I'm going too far. You're young, you're a teenager, you're gay, you're queer. How did your biological family cope with that?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when I discovered I was gay or that I liked men, I don't know what it is. I didn't know what it is. I actually asked my teacher, who then told my parents that, I was like, oh, this, I don't think I want girls as my friends, but I actually think if I was going to go out on a prom date, I want to go with a boy. And the teacher told my mom, and my mom, who was also very a strong Christian and also like, religious person, so, thought that was, absurd and abomination. And how could you think about that? And why don't you want to be with girls? And, even at that age, why should I even be with girls? Like, but it became an abomination. And my parents, my dad was, who had, 4 wives at the time, and, thought it was abomination that I, like boys. And he thought, I was disowned. And I think, I think my mom, for her defense, or in her defense, I would say, she was pressured, and having to be one of the wives out of 4 with other kids, and step kids, and having been pressured by family, by society, and by the church that she was a leader in, sort of thought she had to make the right decision. Like, there was no way this child was hers, and I must have come from somewhere. I don't know. And they thought that it's better leave the house. So I think I was naive at that point. Maybe if I had stayed back and fought back, maybe I would have been able to stay back. But I think, I just wanted to go live my life at that time. I thought like, oh my God, me leaving my parents' home will open, a full house full of men that I could have fun with and be with. I was naive, so I left. And then a couple of days later, I wanted to come back home, and I was no more accepted. So it was like, reality setting that, oh, you're in the street now, and this is what your life looks like.
So if we move on to 2012, and this seems to me another case where the bigger, in this case, AIDS family doesn't take care of its own. But at the Washington AIDS conference in 2012, it's almost as if an explosion happens, as if a sort of a major life event happens there. Can you tell us what that was?
Yeah, I think it wasn't just for me. I think 2011 and 2012 was a big year, or a big time for African LGBT advocates, and the community as a whole. I think we had just gone to ICASA in Addis Ababa, where we were thrown out of the hotel, and we couldn't have a reception at an event. So it was just like popping up it was a new breed of new advocates who were like saying no to a lot of things. And my friend from Namibia, Friedel, and and Joe Nana, rest his soul, we all wanted to fight back. We thought like there was no way, we have new breed of activists who could really, really change the face of the continent in terms of acceptance of, LGBTQI people, and also making sure like, queer people have access to life-saving medication like HIV medication. So we went to fight back. And I think I wrote an abstract, after ICASA, which was one of my first international AIDS conferences. I wanted to go to DC to share more about my work. I think then Jim Pickett at AIDS Chicago we were talking about microbicides, and I think I had passion for like, because I thought like, if we had more prevention tools for gay men to have intersex, more than just condoms, it would go a long way, in helping to prevent new HIV infections. So I wrote an abstract about my work and about why I want microbicides to engage Black gay men in Africa and Nigeria as well during the trials. And I came to present my work in DC. I think I was at the Hampshire, center in the Global Village. And I met this guy from Washington Post. He came over, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, I'm doing great. What are you doing tonight? I'm like, oh, I'm going to this gay party, which is called Fireplace in Washington, D.C. It was my first ever anything gay club. So I was super excited. So I thought, oh, come on, you can meet us there. I thought it was like, a gay guy, maybe he's hitting on me or something. I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, come over to the club. We can hang out and you can meet my friends from different part of Africa, because we came here for work. And then he came, and later on, and we had drinks with my friends. He took pictures. We all took pictures. And I think right after the conference, I went to Jackson, Mississippi, for a holiday, which is like why Jackson, Mississippi, of all places. I I had no idea, but I didn't know about Jackson then, so I went to Jackson for a couple of days, and that was where I was there when the article came out that gay men from Africa having fun in the street of Washington D.C. And it spoke nothing about my work. It just focused on my sexuality and me having fun, which in its own, I wouldn't say anything bad about it, but I think, it over sensationalized my sexuality and, the fact that I'm African. And that on its own is a taboo, given that, I still have to go back to the country. It had my face on it. And this was 2012. And, and Nigeria was still very hostile to LGBT people, and knowing that we had a lot of work to do, like I said earlier on, we thought we had the real opportunity to make a change in the continent for the work around LGBT and HIV in the continent. So like I was desperate to go back because I had a project that I just got funded through PEPFAR. I wanted to go back to that project, and then I did go back, but it became a big deal when I got back to Abuja, and I had to run for my safety. And after I was attacked, I had no choice but to come back to the States. And I've been here since then.
So you realize you need to leave Nigeria. Why did you pick the US?
I mean, I think I had the only visa that I had in my passport, because I had just come back from the US for a conference, was the US visa. So I literally had no choice. I think the choice was made for me even before I could even think about it. So I had no choice to decide where I wanted to go, if I wanted to leave. I think the choice was made for me by the people who attacked me, that, this country is not good for you. We don't like people like you here. So I had no say in the decision that was made for me to leave the country.
Well, I mean, if you think of the years in between, and this may be hard for you to hear, but you've become a hugely internationally respected figure in the global AIDS movement, and I want to come back and get your views on where we go from here. I can't help reflecting that I am now a US citizen. I'm an immigrant, and yet I have no doubt my experience was nothing like yours. Was it difficult to choose the US, and how easy has it been to call it home?
I mean, I think it has in different ways. First of all, thank you. I don't know if I am that important to the AIDS response. I think, there are a lot of people like Yvette, for instance, who are, icons in the field, and Emily Bass and Micheal, all of my colleagues, I think at AVAC, who and others across the globe who are doing amazing things in this field. And I think, they have changed the face of the HIV response globally. So, but to your question, I mean, I don't know. It hasn't been easy in its own, but I think I feel privileged to be able to be here and to be able to do the same work I was doing in Nigeria, but also be in some form decision making tables that that helps shape the response in Africa and across the globe, especially for key populations. So I would say in that sense, yes. Although it hasn't been easy, but I think in its own way, it has given me the opportunity to be in decision making meetings, and also to hear my view and help make the decisions that help shape the response.
And grab that seat at the table so that the traditional doctors from universities aren't the ones all sitting there. So one of the reasons for us talking now is the HBO documentary, The Legend of the Underground. It came out on HBO in the United States, I guess, last week. Eric and I were gripped, just sat there and couldn't take our eyes off it. It is immensely powerful. It's a hugely personal documentary, and I urge everyone to watch it. It's not entertainment. It is harrowing, but it is inspiring. Micheal, why did you decide it was important to share your story?
I have always shared my story in different platforms. And I think, I think in AIDS 2014, I was on the plenary speakers. And I think my presentation was focused on my experience from being, a teenager and leaving home at a very young age. and speaking about my experiences, why, teenagers should not be homeless and, as gay teens. So I think at that point in my life, I wanted a bigger platform. I think, like always, like 2012, I do feel like right now there is a need for our stories to go mainstream and for people to really see us for who we are and not just think, well, this things are happening across the globe. There's no big deal. But like it's a big deal. And, I think I wanted to make sure our stories are told in bigger platform. People get to see us for who we really are and hear us. And I think for the first time in my life, I do feel like, optimistic about what the future looks like for the continent and for queer Nigerians and non-conformists. I do feel a lot of positivity, moving forward, because I do see that, now people see who we are and, not from one perspective anymore, but from our own perspective for what we want them to see. And I think, it was hard for me to completely open up in that way. And I think, I was telling a friend of mine, I'm like, I am not, I don't hide about my HIV status. If you ask me, it's public. But I think for the first time, I got to be completely open on that platform. And people were surprised. People that knew me for years, like Mike, I never knew what HIV was. I'm like, I've always been. Maybe you never cared to ask, but it's been public. But I think that for me, that told me something like people are going to use that to say, well, this guy, he's here, he's HIV positive. So, I want, it's not a death sentence to be HIV positive, right? It's not a death sentence that people, you can be HIV positive and still live your life. So I think, that's just one part of the story. But I do feel like, that it's going to change things. And I'm really, really positive about it.
You worked with two well-known directors who created this. And I wondered, were there any times when you felt worried that they might not protect your life story, that you wouldn't have a say in the way in which the story was being told?
Nneka and Giselle are very close friends of mine. And I think before the documentary, we came to meet, they met my roommate, Deji, at an Ethiopian restaurant in Harlem. And they came over to the house to a party that I hosted in my apartment that had over 60 Nigerian queer people from, having fun in the party. So for the director, Nneka, it was her first time of seeing queer people who were Nigerians in New York City. And she was just overwhelmed. And, she and I got to meet, we spoke about my story, about her story too. I think, in a way, the directors also reflected on themselves. I think when you produce a film, you try to portray your own life story through the documentary. So I think in a sense, they also show their life stories through the documentary as well. Like for instance, Nneka and her father are not in good terms because she's a lesbian and her father is Nigerian. And the other director, she's Jamaican, and the issues in Jamaica with queer people. So in a way, they reflected on their own country situations. And, they were extremely cautious of the story. And they took care of us. They made sure, we were not exposing things we wouldn't want to say, or, they took care of us. I think at some point, obviously, they pushed us, they pushed us in a good way. And I think they pushed us to make sure people see what we want people to see and, to share our truth, to live our truth, to be who we are. And I don't think they forced us to do whatever we didn't want to do. So I'm really, really grateful to them and how they took care of our stories.
Yeah. And as a sort of a central backdrop to the documentary, Nigeria has in place the Same-Sex Prohibition Act that was signed into law by the former president, Goodluck Jonathan. What does this law involve? I mean, the story, I don't want to ruin the plot for everyone, but it does make it clear that some of the legal machinations around the law are actually hard to prove. But what is going on there?
I mean, I remember in 2011 and 2010, that was when the law was being discussed in Nigeria. And it took 3-4 years for the government to finally sign into law in 2014. And the law strictly right now, one of the simplest things of the law is that you and I cannot be having a conversation about gay people at all. We'll be going to jail because we're gay and we're having conversations about LGBT people. So we'll be going to jail literally. But I think the reason why it's hard to prove is because, you have to educate every single Nigerian about the law. And I think the government hasn't done a great job in educating people that this law is intact and you can use it, you can catch people from it. So like, either way, because again, like every other country, Nigeria is a very corrupt country. So the police people actually find a way. If they do come to arrest you, you can bribe your way out if you have the funds, right? And the lawyer can come and spin it off in a way. So that's why we actually haven't seen anyone beyond the 57, individuals who were arrested, who went to court and went on trial. Beyond those people, we actually haven't seen anyone who has been persecuted based on the law. But what we've seen is that people are using the law as a way to extort queer people. Yeah. And using the law to extort people and then put the fear and stigma on them. But the law is actually hard to prove because not a lot of people are educated about what the law actually says.
Yeah. I mean, it's the perfect tool to discriminate, isn't it? And I guess what is particularly galling, especially for the UK in this so-called period of global Britain after Brexit, is that the anti-sodomy laws were actually created by the British Empire at the start of the 20th century. And so my question is that it, or is there more than the legacy of British Empire that is creating the stigma and discrimination that the LGBTI community faces?
I mean, I think, it's not just in Nigeria. The British Empire sort of created this stigma and the laws that are being, transformed in different ways right now by a lot of African governments is because, like, when they came, they brought the Christianity and what the Bible says. And before they brought up the Christianity and what the Bible says, Africans always lived their way in certain ways. And being queer was always part of our history. And when the Bible came, it sort of transformed it to not just the Bible, but actually putting legislatures in place to persecute people who go against what the Bible says. So I think right now it's not just about apologizing and say, hey, yeah, we came to your country and we messed up, so sorry for that. But no, you've actually lived a legacy that can never be erased. And it's, you've lived a legacy unless you're going to take away the Bible and change what it says. So how are you going to do that? So it's like, it's not just about like, even I come from Benin City and the British invaded my city and took away our prince. So there is a lot of things that the British Empire did back then that still very much resonate today to people. And people have taken those things and they are part of our constitutions, our laws. And so it's more than just apologizing. It's how you actually actively, take responsibility for what you've done and make sure people who was living in those countries are safe as much as you can. So that, for instance, cutting funding, from that DFA did, I think it's in some ways it's part of, it's not the way you respond. So how do you assure that the people you've put in danger because of your laws, because of your history, won't be able to get response from NGOs who provide life-saving response to them because of the things you did? So I think in my view, they're all linked. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, I try not to be political on this show, but two things really rankle and upset me. And the leaving of the European Union is one of them, but the other that cuts to the bone is the cavalier way the British government has just decimated overseas development aid, as if it's a nice thing to do. Well, no, it isn't. It's centuries of exploitation that need to be repaid. And, it's not enough just to watch Downton Abbey and think everything was fine. There is a history throughout the 20th century of crass criminal behavior. We need to be brought account to it. Well, there were moments in the Legend of the Underground, and I hope you don't mind my asking this, where you actually did seem pretty uncomfortable yourself. And I think of a scene where you were meeting the elite. Feels very much like a Margaret Atwood speculative novel, doesn't it? A group of richer, more politically connected folks. You all met at someone's glamorous apartment. And there seemed to be an enmity between you and them. And it seemed very intimidating. Is that right? Or am I just reading too much into the drama?
No. There were tensions that were real, and I think like I said in the film, like when you leave Nigeria as an advocate, and then you lived abroad for a long time, people tend to make you seem like you're not Nigerian enough to attend to the issues in the country. That you've lost your sense of belonging in the community. So you've lost your street cred. So you are no more part of the community anymore because you live abroad. So I think what happened in that dinner was like real life, because people that I've known for a long time, not a lot of them are my friends in the dinner. Like there are people that I know I admire from afar, but they're not like my close friends. Maybe one or two of them are. But I think it was contentious in the fact that yeah, I am in Nigeria, and people questioning how real am I? Why am I Nigerian? Why did I come back? What am I doing here? It was absurd, and I'm like, what? I was rightfully pissed at the situation. I think a lot of clips that I didn't add to the movie, but I think it was you saw it right, and I think it also, like the fact that these people were claimed elites. I just want to clarify, right? The film was right to classify people as elites, but those people are not elites by choice, right? So they rightfully fought hard to create a safe space in a very, very difficult country that they live in for themselves. And they are non-conformists, they're queer, they're people but they want to live their life safely. So they found a way to find some resources that they fought really hard for to create a safe space for themselves. So I think they are not elites, quote unquote, that they want to live separately from the rights of the community. It's just that they found a way to live safely, and some of them are still very connected to the community, and they still fight hard. They're activists, part of the community.
There's another person that the documentary follows, the social media sensation that is James Brown, and the hashtag they didn't court me. How is he doing? And can we get his Twitter handle? Because I'd encourage everyone to follow him on Twitter.
James is amazing. Actually, I was just speaking to him. He's trying to apply to New York, Film Academy to come study in the US. So hopefully gets a scholarship to come do that. But he's amazing, and he's a young, brilliant human being who was so much passion. And I think, I love and admire James for who he is, and I take him for who he is, and I think he wants to see a brighter future for himself, for his community, and he has a way of doing his own things. That might not be the conventional way to be an activist, but that's his own way. And I really respect him and admire him for that. His Twitter handle is WF, which is world famous, _ James Brown.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Amazing.
So
he's
we'll
doing
include
okay.
that. Yeah, we'll include that in the notes, and a shot in the arm will definitely follow him. But yeah, I mean, along with you, a real star that was what a pleasant person to meet. You said in a recent Vogue interview, and yes, even I have been known to read Vogue, but you said, we are oppressed, but we are beyond that. And in many ways, I think that goes to the heart of the documentary. What does acknowledging that you're oppressed, but you're going beyond that, what does it mean in action for you, Micheal?
I mean, I think Nigerians generally, we are people who have a lot going against us, right? From corruption to bad government and, roads, and we still find a way to be, some of the happiest people in the world. And we have a film industry, which is like the second largest in the globe, Nollywood. And so we found a way to be happy and to, even when we are faced with tremendous circumstances that would destroy anybody, but we find a way to find happiness and to find joy, even in the circumstances. So I think it's not different from queer people in Nigeria. And I think we have whatever normal Nigerians are going through, we triple that. It's what queer Nigerians are going through. And still, yet we find a way to find a community. And I think one thing that is so important to queer Nigerians is that our friends, our community, and if you see the young teenagers, and I think that was me 15 years ago. The safe house, that was me. And some of my friends that I met those days are still, the ones that are still alive, are still very close friends of mine, and some of them live across the globe. And we found a way to find a community. And that is so precious to us, to who we are. And yes, all of those things, the law, the discrimination, the constant attack, or sometimes the murder. But we find a way to find happiness and within ourselves and within, people that are around us. I think that's what I meant by that. Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of this, on top of HBO releasing a documentary, you organize Global Black Pride at the end of the same week, essentially. You co-founded it in 2020, and it's a sort of a virtual global pride across 3 continents. You had it live streamed on Grindr's YouTube. And I really got 3 questions. 1, where the hell do you get your energy, and can I have some? And 2, it was an incredible event. And you got to get the illustrious Blacks to perform Black Like Jesus, which I think is just a huge achievement. But it's not a party. Global Black Pride has a very clear research and advocacy agenda. Can you talk a bit about how all of that fits together?
I think, during the height of the pandemic and a lot of prides were canceled, that was last year. And, we thought about, a lot of our community members wouldn't be able to go celebrate Pride. As you know, in several countries across the globe where they celebrate Pride, they also have Black Pride. So we thought about, we had this global Pride that was hosted by Interpride, which is great and amazing. But we felt like, that was mostly white people, and it was great, and people participated. But we thought, we weren't the prides that were canceled across the globe that were led by Black organizations and Black, individuals didn't have a space. So we created Global Black Pride and invited all of the Pride organizers who organize Black Pride across the globe to come and let's do, which is crazy idea ever, 11-hour long events across all of the continents. And, it was crazy to plan. We had less than 4 weeks to plan it. That was last year. And it was great. We put it together, and we're like, this year we thought it's more than just a space now. We want to build the space and take it on. And it's crazy that we did not have a Global Black Pride before we did that.
It is absolutely crazy. But I will say, you really utilized the technical opportunities that COVID-19 has thrown at us. I mean, it was incredibly well put together.
Thank you. We had, again, this not to take all of the credits. We had, host committees across all the continents. We had individuals who walked through their countries in all of the continents and to plan their 4-hour segments. So each continent had a 4-hour block to plan their segments. And what I did was, and my team in New York did, was just to work with them to coordinate, to make sure the content was strong enough to relay in a global stage.
So can we talk a bit about Nigeria and the state of HIV in Nigeria? I made the big mistake and infuriated myself by looking at the UNAIDS country data on HIV. And it's a reminder to me that a multitude of statistics can hide the reality. And the government obviously says that it has a very low rate of 1.4%. But, given the size of the population, it's around 211 million. The number of people living with HIV could be anywhere between 1.3 million and 2.4 million. And there were some odd data points about saying that the men who have sex with men who are HIV positive, barely 11% of them were on access to treatment. This reveals to me an epidemic that is targeting disproportionately vulnerable and marginalized communities. What's really going on there?
I have had my issues with the UNS data, especially the yearly reports. And I think the focus on leaving no one behind is like, we are not even on the train or on the car that is not leaving us behind. So like the train is long gone, and gay Nigerians and young women in Nigeria are not even on that train. So I think just going back to the film a little bit, I think when Timmy said we are not seen, people don't see us, like queer Nigerians in the HIV response are not seen. And so much of them are not seen, are not part of the government-led responses. So it's hard to, the data that UNS has or that the government has, it's inadequate, completely inadequate. Like the size estimates in Nigeria is absolutely wrong for queer people, for MSM and TG and injection drug users, for instance. The size estimate is not right. But again, not to take away the things that, PEPFAR and CDC and a lot of the NGOs in Nigeria, the work they are doing, because I think they are doing a great job in given the circumstances they have to work in. I think, they've been a long capacity building for queer-led organizations in Nigeria around HIV response. I think at this point, I think we need a transformation, because we don't want capacity building anymore. We want those organizations to do the tracking, to be the implementers. Because right now, what we are seeing is that people are losing access, or they are losing track of the people who should be targeted. And that's why the data is wrong, because there are some people who are not even counted, who are quote unquote hard to reach. So again, like absolutely, people are still dying of HIV in Nigeria up until today. People are not found and they died, and then we have no idea why they died, but we can see through the symptoms that this is why this person died, and it still happens today. So I think there's a long way to go, and I know there are a lot of investment that's been made in the Nigerian AIDS response across the years. But I think right now, not even Nigeria, we need a specific focus on key populations and young women. And I think we need a specific target and focus on them, and make sure they are the one leading the response. They are the one leading, not just inviting us to the table. We want to be in charge of the meeting. We want to call the meetings, and we want to come and participate. That's where we are.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think in a way we should be looking to you to organize the meetings. You decide the experts with the help of UNAIDS who can help inform how you answer questions. But these are essentially technical people with technical skills, and they need to be brought to support you, not the other way around. There's something very funny happening, particularly out here on the West Coast, and it's a meme called Decolonizing Global Health. And I just there's a smile there. And I just wondered, does that have any resonance for you? And what would it really look like, do you think?
Yeah, it's a very, I think in some ways it's a straightforward question and with a straightforward answer. But I do feel like, for just going back to PEPFAR a little bit, where last 2 years or 3 years, they've tried to push 60% of funding has to be to, community-based and community-led organizations in the continent where the responses are. But I think in that sense, decolonizing, it's a term that is great for what it is. But I think there are people who will be left behind, because there are people who, when this would decolonize global health and, give back the response and give back leadership to these countries and to this government, who are, again, just speaking from my own view, who are historically homophobic and do not follow science, communities will be left behind. So again, why I completely agreed to the fact that we need to decolonize global health and make sure, and make sure people in the continent and the countries where the responses, where we have the most epidemics focused on, have them lead the response. But at the same way, who are those people? What are their values? And I would say people tell them, well, part of the colonizing is like making people in charge and respecting their values and respecting their culture. But what if that culture and those values doesn't make people like me exist? So it's again, when we use those terms, and when we, again, I'm okay with using those terms, but actually structurally, if you're going to fund and focus on it, you have to make sure you have the right people in place, and you have to make sure you have some strong lines that we will not cross this line, and we have to make sure, again, that's why people need to be part of those conversations. Another term is that is going around right now is like global health security, which in its own is like a very confusing and had its own, issues that they want to go into. But I think all of these things I'm throwing around is like, we need to make sure we are not just throwing things around for the throwing things around sake. Like COVID response, I've taught us a lot of things that we should be learning from right now. And like, there are people who have been left behind. Like even to give the government the power, this is how they're going to do certain things. Like in South Africa and a lot of countries whereby they've enacted laws to discriminate against queer people because they caused COVID.
Yes. I think in many ways, the decolonization debate sort of happens in very white university research settings. And I think it's absolutely right to say that there shouldn't just be white people sitting around the table making decisions. But we've come so far in the North where we wouldn't dream of just saying police chiefs and church leaders are the ones that sit around the table to discuss the needs of marginalized populations in Oakland or San Francisco. We need the communities there. They need to tell us. And I think the same, honestly, it's the letting go of responsibility and accountability and having trust. But one of the other things, Micheal, that really disturbs me is taking this phrase, decolonizing global public health. It seems even really more offensive given our failure to ensure COVID vaccine distribution in Africa. And, and again, looking at Nigeria, there are 2.5 million people fully vaccinated. That means that just under 99% of the population are not. And, for me, I've had a career in global health. I'm at a crisis point. I genuinely am at a loss at how we got into this level of inequity, given everything that we was talking about and were committing to. And I'd sort of almost ask you, what advice would you give me as an advocate? Where should I be putting my time and effort?
It's really sad to, when you look at the data of where COVID vaccines are being given, who is taking it, which countries have more of it, and you see in the US, we are pushing people and fighting for people to get vaccinated, begging, literally, and then we have animals not being vaccinated here.
Yeah.
And in a lot of countries across the globe, in Africa, we have less than 1% of the population in Nigeria who have been vaccinated. And it's not because people don't want to, it's just because people have no access. And it takes me back to the ages of HIV when ACT came out, and who have access to ACT was white cisgender men who could afford it, that could get it then. And people cannot afford, they have to die because they can't get it. Or we have to wait for them to die to come pick their ACT off to give to us to take it. So it's like it's HIV response all over again. And I think in my view, it's like, I just ask people to, as a government, put your money where your mouth is, right? It's one thing to be putting a statement to say, hey, we're going to ask Gavi to give out 10 million vaccines to A, B, and C country. Put your money where your mouth is. Like, how are we able to track, again, that vaccines are getting where they need to be at? Asking your government to show the data, what they're supporting, which country they're supporting. It's one way. I believe in data. Like, show me the data, show me what you're funding now, which country is getting vaccinated, and what is your priority to others who are not. Sending vaccine to Canada or to the UK, they can. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they can afford it. But countries where they can only afford such things, and they have no access to it.
Yeah.
So again, that's what I would say. Like, just asking your government to put your money where their mouth is.
Yeah. On a much more positive note, Micheal, you are really a living proof of the symbiosis of human rights advocacy and global health. And by that, I mean that you are able to channel the power of hope and perseverance to overcome challenge and hardship. And I've always been wanting to ask you what you feel in your heart would be a truly effective global health strategy, one where the global health architecture supports people rather than supports careers of diplomats. And what does success look like for you, where we have a global health strategy that lifts up everyone rather than those with influence and accident of geography?
Before I answer that question, just want to say, I've had the privilege of working at AVAC for the last 7 years. And I think AVAC has taught me so much of the things I know today. And I think, if you ask Micheal this, it would be like, it would tell you people-centered approach. And it would be like, you have to make sure the response is focused on the person and what the person needs are. You are meeting their need, not what the country needs, not what you need, or not what, your data is saying. It's what that person that is in that data, what they need. So I think secondly, I would say, there's something I've been pushing for the past 2 years now, 3 years, to be precise. It's like around structural interventions. And I think it's the next thing that I think could make a tremendous impact in the AIDS response, in global health in general, right? Like, making sure we are not just focusing on the biomedical, that we are looking at the structural. Like, what are the issues that make people not want to go get tested? Are they out of school? Are they not able to feed? Like, are they being attacked, or are they in jail, or do they need a lawyer? Those structural issues that make it difficult for people to respond, or to get, where they can get tested or take their medications, is as important as the biomedical. And we don't focus a lot on the structural. And we've done a lot in the biomedical. So I think, in my view, that would be, something I would say would be a success if we can find a way to fund structural interventions, and not just focus on the biomedical alone.
Now, throughout this conversation, we've referred to AVAC, and you work there. You've been there a number of years. Can you just tell us a little bit about what AVAC is? It used to be the AIDS Vaccine Access Coalition, but that's not the case anymore.
No. Yeah, AVAC, we're just AVAC. We're a global advocacy organization. We're based in New York City, and we work across the globe. AVAC is a prevention and treatment focused organizations. We work with advocates across the globe. And, we're in the middle of between like researchers and advocates. So we are an advocacy organization. We are not a direct service delivery organization, but we work with advocates and fund, and be, I would say, a partner with advocates in different countries to respond to the issues that affect, that are part of the response of the country. So I think, in my view, I have been part of AVAC for the last 7 years. And I think, one of the key things that made me join AVAC was PrEP, because I thought, we wanted to make sure we had PrEP access to MSMs and key population in Africa. And I think, AVAC, in my view, has done a great job in making sure key pubs have access to PrEP in the continent.
So, to wrap it up, I know we're coming up to the top of the hour. I always ask my guests how they have stayed sane during this crazy period of lockdown. Are there any TV series you've binge watched, or books that you've read that you would recommend to us? I guess an obvious thing is that you've made a documentary, and not everybody can do that, and organized a global Pride event. Again, not everyone can do that. But what has kept you sane?
I would say, so my partner and I, we have a little golden doodle, Josie. She's adorable. So, just going to DC and seeing her every other weekend has kept me sane. And she is like the most beautiful thing ever. And apart from that, I've been recently, rewatching Pose again, which is, one of the greatest thing ever made. So Pose and It's a Scene, the HBO movie as well, it's been something I've been watching. And I read the Obama book, the new one. So, yeah.
So when I first started doing these podcasts, much to the chagrin of my producer and director, Eric Aspera, I always wanted to touch in with people on what their favorite Pet Shop Boys song was. And so I really want to give this rebirth and start with you, Micheal. What is your favorite Pet Shop Boys song?
I don't think I know Pet Shop Boys song. Can you...
See, this is what he said. Like, Ben, not everyone is going to know that this is a British global sensation. Well, you mentioned It's a Sin. I mean, they wrote the music to that. West End Girls.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, Micheal, this changes everything. But hey, I got to say, going back to the legend of the underground, one of the other highlights for me was your T-shirt that said bisexual. I love that. And I'm going to get in contact with you separately to see how I can get hold of one.
Yeah, it was made by one of the fashion designers in the film. He's amazing. I'm sure you can get it.
Oh, it was fabulous. Well, Micheal, thank you for everything that you do. I honestly don't know that you realize how much of an inspiration you are to
Thank you.
young people, but also jaded old folks like myself who've been in this for way, way too long. So, Micheal, you are a shot in the arm.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, many thanks again to Micheal. And just as a note, that T-shirt I was referring to, it's hashtag bisexual. Thanks to Eric Espera, our producer and director from Newsdoc Media. And of course, a huge thanks to you. We'd love to know your comments and suggestions on this or other podcasts. You can find us on our website, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram and Twitter at Shot Arm Podcast. Have a great week and a safe week, everybody.